So, as presumably most of you knew, today the paper draft was due. I just had a look. Some people are either going to not submit or submit it late. A reminder, if you didn't do this, please also email it to your partner. The peer review is due next week. And the two chapters today are pretty short, so you'll have some time at the end of class if you want to get started. You could even talk to your partner if you want. You still have to write it out, of course, for marks. Yeah, this unit is probably going to be the easiest. So it's 4 chapters as always, but they're all pretty simple. So next week's lecture will also probably be on the shorter side. Is anyone very sad about this?
Devastated, really.
Devastated. Okay, one person's devastated.
Yeah.
You did your job.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just get started. I'll just hammer it through. It's a beautiful day out. We might get out early today.
That'd be nice.
So, no, I thought you were devastated.
I'm devastated about this, the easiness. I'm
Happy about getting out early.
Yeah, thrilled,
There you go.
really.
Oh, no, that's consistent. I
Yeah.
guess. Okay, the first term, which should be review from intro, is naturalistic observation.
What chapter is this?
So we are on chapter 8. So today we're going to cover chapters 8 and 9. Chapter 8 is on various observational methods. Chapter 9 is on surveys. So, naturalistic observation is contrasted with lab work. You are observing people in their natural habitat, if you want to put it that way. So you're not recruiting them to come into the lab to do something. Close the door, please. So you could observe people, in the mall, beach, playground, whatever. Observing people behave in the real world.
Polite stalking?
Polite stalking, that's one way to put it. One thing this does is it helps to avoid something we mentioned in passing in another chapter, which is participant reactivity. I think that term comes up a bit later, but people behave differently when they know they're being observed. And so in this case, they, at least in many cases, don't know they're being observed. So I'll actually show a video adding some detail.
There was a question over there.
Yep.
I was curious about the ethics of this. Because
Yeah.
I know they're in a study.
Yep, you don't need ethics approval for this. So as long as it's, I assume you would if you're doing something like observing a school playground or something, but if it's a public place and it's not kids, it doesn't matter. So at any point, if you're out in the mall, you could be being observed by a psychologist, who knows?
Are you allowed to, for instance, do the dime test or whatever? Like put a dime on the ground and see how many people pick it up?
That's a good question. In that case, you're interacting with them, so I think you do need ethics approval for that.
Okay.
So if you're doing naturalistic observation, there's no experimental manipulation. Something like that would probably be, there may not be random assignment, but it's something like a field experiment. So
Okay.
then you're actually manipulating or intervening.
Okay, which would be
So just passive observation. Yeah.
Copy. Thank you.
Did you have a question, or was it answered? Okay, I thought there was a hand up. Must be seeing things. Okay, let's watch this video. Okay. The book briefly mentions quantitative and qualitative data. We've already talked about that. You can get both types of data for naturalistic observation. Nothing really new there. 2 types of observation you can do here. Participant observation and concealed observation. Participant observation means that you are doing the thing that the other people in the natural environment are doing. So if you want to know how skateboarders do stuff, and you just kind of go there and skateboard and pay attention to what people are doing, you're doing participant observation, meaning like you're participating in the thing that you're observing.
Like, you say you're doing the thing that you're observing.
Yeah, or you're participating in the activity that you're watching. Concealed observation means the people in question are unaware of your presence. So more like the, what did you call it? The polite stalking? So that would be more that second one. Yep.
Can participant observation also be concealed at the same time?
So yeah, the book does add the caveat that technically you can do both at the same time. You could be a participant and concealed. Don't worry about that. I think it's just going to lead to confusion. To a first pass, they're separate, but the book adds the parentheses that you can have both. So I already mentioned participant reactivity. So one of the advantage of the earlier method, naturalistic observation, is that especially if it's concealed, is you can prevent participant reactivity. If people don't know they're being observed, you don't have that downside. Another observational method, so the key with naturalistic observation, the key downside the video talked about is there is no experimental manipulation. That's also true here, so it's just an observational method. Case study. This is a study in which you study one person, or maybe a small number of people, but certainly a small number, in depth. So you study this single person or small group of people in depth. Yep.
I thought that case studies could also have like other things tied to it as well, like interviews.
Other what, sorry?
Like other things in addition to observational stuff, like interviews or even additional experiments or something.
That's true. So there can be things besides just observing them, but I guess by observational I mean in passing. There's no manipulation. So there's no experimental manipulation on it.
But it can be both quantitative or qualitative.
It can definitely be quantitative or qualitative.
Okay.
Yes. But no, that's a good caveat. You can have more than just observing them from the outside. You can give them interviews, you can do brain scans, you can do more detailed things. But there's no manipulation and there's a small number of people. The cases in particular I'm thinking of are the cases of brain damage. So this is one area where case studies are very useful to psychologists and neuroscientists. It's easier to learn more about animal neuroscience, especially causal relationships, because we can destroy parts of animals' brains and see what happens. But we can't do that with humans. So you have to typically rely on correlational methods. You scan people's brains while they think about math, and you look at which parts of the brain light up. But by definition, that's only correlational. You don't know if that part of the brain is causally implicated in the function in question. But as you all know, people sometimes damage their brains on their own without the researcher. Or they may have a tumor, or there's various ways the brain can get damaged. And although they won't admit it, deep down the neuroscientists are happy when that happens, because then they get to find out what that part of the brain does. With consent, of course, you can then administer batteries of psychological tests and see which functions are affected. So it's a bit of a longer video. If you're in my intro, at least my 1100 class, you would have seen this. One of the most famous examples in psychology is HM, or Henry Molaison. So Henry Molaison had his hippocampus removed because life-threatening seizures were thought to be caused by it. And indeed, following this surgery, his seizures did stop, but he also lost the ability to form new long-term memories. But there's several asterisks to that. It turns out only some long-term memories he couldn't form, So as we'll see in the video, there's a lot of insight that was gleaned from this one case. So it's a really cool example of how much you can learn from the right kind of case study. Okay, so the end of that one's a little depressing. So to possibly brighten your mood, I have one other case, not testable. So this is not testable either, but a key distinction you would have learned in intro is the distinction between retrograde amnesia and anterograde amnesia. So retrograde means you lose memories from before the brain damage in question. Anterograde means you have difficulty forming new memories post-damage. Henry actually did have a bit of both, but less retrograde. He did retain some memories from before the surgery, but the key deficit is the anterograde. This other case I'll briefly show you, you may have seen this in intro, this is a shorter clip, is someone who had both, quite severe. So they live on a 7 to 30 second window, almost nothing from before, and no ability to form new memories. The cute part is, the only thing he remembers from before is his wife. So that's one sort of cute silver lining out of it. So there's a different case, Clive Wearing, who I believe is still alive. So that's sort of cute, even if she leaves for a while and comes back, it's as if it's the first time we've seen her. Might get old, but sort of cute. Okay, just a couple more terms. And that's the end of this chapter, and then we'll do surveys. So the term archival research. This means analyzing existing data, no new data collection. So the book mentions this could include public records. That's something you could analyze. One fancy kind of archival research we'll talk about in a future chapter is a meta-analysis. So that's where you look at existing studies and try to pool them together in some way. So again, you're not collecting new data, you're just doing analysis of existing data. Related method, content analysis. Here you're looking at written records. So by which I mean, you could be looking at, I don't know, bodies of literature and look at how many times aggressive words occurred, something like that. So you're doing some kind of analysis of written things.
Again,
Would that be
no
like a
new data.
literature review?
Sorry?
Like a literature review?
So I guess that could count. Some kind of analysis, something written down.
Would a meta-analysis not be a content analysis?
So the examples that the book gives are things like movie scripts or things like that. So I don't think it involves looking at existing numbers in a data set or in past data sets. And that is everything in chapter 8. So as I say, not very much stuff. The next chapter, slightly longer, is chapter 9, which is on surveys. So all of you did a kind of survey, and this chapter just flags a couple of issues related to survey research. Is there a hand? Has it been retracted?
Sorry,
Yeah.
the inter-rater
I think I just mentioned it in passing because it was in a prior chapter, but I'm happy to repeat it. It's when two different people observe something, and the question is, how much do they agree? So I guess we talked about it earlier in the context of things like IQ tests or personality tests, and the idea there would be, if two different psychologists administer the test, do they get the same result? I suppose in this context, what you should be thinking of is, if two different people do a naturalistic observation, do they see the same kinds of patterns, or is it more idiosyncratic? Okay, so let's flag some issues related to survey research. One kind of bias that's very important to be on the lookout for is social desirability bias. How many of you heard about this in intro? Is it mentioned? Maybe half-ish. So this is a bias towards responding in a way that makes you look socially desirable, or makes you look good. As you all know from being alive, people are not always 100% honest.
What?
Exactly. So, one specific type of dishonesty is this one, answering in a way to make yourself look good. What to do about this? This is a big problem actually in my own area. So as I've mentioned, moral psych is what I studied in graduate school. And if you ask people, how would you respond to these different moral dilemmas? There's a bit of a question mark there. Are people just trying to make themselves look good, or are they honestly reporting how they would behave? This is more just as a point of curiosity. It's not a testable fact, but one thing that some scales will do, including the MMPI, for example, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, is they'll include items where the socially desirable answer is true of almost no one. So, have you ever done anything you were ashamed of? Have you ever missed a day of flossing in your life? I don't know if those are exact, but things like that where, okay, if you answer yes, or give the socially desirable answer to every one of those, maybe you're the 1 in a million people of whom that's true, but probably not. So we would take your data with a grain of salt.
Does anonymous, making it so it's anonymous, kind of try to avoid the social justice?
Yeah, so one thing you can do is make them anonymous. One funny example that comes to mind is if you ask men and women how many sex partners they have had in their life, there's an average difference, which how many opposite sex partners have you had? And when you think about it, that can't be true. The average is the same by definition. If you make it anonymous, the gap closes. Both sides bring their answers back to reality. So that is one way to improve it, although not perfect. Attitudes and beliefs. These are two different things you can ask about. I have very little to say about this. These are two things you can ask about. Attitudes, if you want to define it, it's a kind of mental state that has more emotion built into it, or evaluation built into it. Beliefs are more neutral. You can ask about facts, demographics, and behaviors. So, demographics would be like ethnicity, gender, age, stuff like that. Behaviors, how often you brush your teeth, how often you exercise. Pretty simple chapter. Okay, the next section is on things to avoid, so different bad kinds of questions. If any of you had these kinds of bad questions in your survey, I guess it's too late now, but something to keep in mind for the future. We learn from our mistakes. Unnecessary complexity, so if you make the question too difficult to understand, the data will be less reliable. People may just be answering randomly because they don't understand the question. You should also avoid double-barreled questions. So these are questions that combine two into one, and that's bad because you then don't quite know what someone's saying. So if after this class someone gave you a survey in which they asked, do you like David's teaching clips and the way, or video clips and the way he teaches in one question? Well, what if you like the clips but not the teaching, or vice versa? Then it's not clear how to respond. So each question should include one thing. Yeah, so just a question that includes more than one question in one. So, do you like David's video clips and his teaching? Yes or no? And it's like, well, what if I only like one?
And it's like you can only answer it with one.
Exactly, yeah.
It's set up so that you can't answer both questions.
Yeah, if it's both separately, that's fine. But if it's like a rating scale, like 1 to 7, how much do you like David's teaching and clips? 1 to 7. Okay, that would be a double-barreled question. The next one includes there are a number of different ways to get this, but the broad definition is, the term is loaded question. A loaded question is anything that biases people towards giving a certain answer. So any way of wording the question that biases people towards giving a particular kind of answer. So there are different ways to do this. One is by including emotional content, or loaded terms, if you like. So the example the book gives is, do you favor eliminating wasteful excesses in the school budget? It's like, well, it's pretty clear what answer the questioner wants you to give. Another way of subtly getting someone to give a certain kind of answer is to have a hidden assumption in the question. So if there's an assumption built into the question, we would say it's a loaded question. So the famous, joke example that people always give, like if you ask someone, have you stopped beating your wife? No matter, at least the first two answers that come to mind are yes or no, and both those answers assume you're beating your wife, or at least have at some point.
So you should answer no.
No, you should answer, I've never beaten my wife. So if you say no, then you haven't stopped beating your wife.
My answer would be
Because
like,
you never started.
excuse me?
Right, well, at the very least, if the answer no, so have you stopped beating your wife? No. The answer taken at face value means I am still beating my wife. So the hidden assumption is you have beaten your wife before. Just one example of this happening in real life. Biden's press secretary was asked a question with a hidden assumption. Now, the hidden assumption is probably true, but nonetheless, it is an example of a hidden assumption. So the press secretary is trained to do his job, so he notices right away there's a hidden assumption and rejects it. Although, as I say, the idea that Biden swore at meetings is pretty believable. But in any case, there's a real world case. Next, you should avoid negative wording. So, example the book is, do you believe that the city should not approve some proposal? It's easier for people to get their head around it if you ask it in a positive way, not like, do you not think this? The next issue to be aware of, and this isn't an issue so much with the questions, although there are ways to ask questions that get around this, but yay saying and nay saying. As you all know, some of you better than others, people are sometimes lazy. Me too, we're all lazy sometimes. Suppose there's a bunch of questions that look like this. They have answers ranging from 1 to 5. People are doing the survey, they didn't sleep well, they're having a fight with their girlfriend. Just go down one row or the other row. That's what's meant by yay saying or nay saying.
Wait, can you say it again?
So just saying yes or no to everything.
Okay.
Just kind of clicking straight down the line.
Also called a response set.
Yeah, I cut out the term response set, but this would be one type of response set. It would also fall under the heading of inattentive responding, which is what it sounds like. So responding in a way where you're not paying attention to the questions. So there are some ways to catch people doing this. The practice that we had in my lab was we'd have a few attention checks. So questions like, please select number 2 in the middle of something. If they don't do it, either they're contrarian or they're more likely just not paying attention. Or questions like, multiple choice, what are the colors in the Canadian flag? Maybe they don't know, but probably they're not paying attention. Yeah.
Is this supposed to be a guideline for making surveys that don't ask questions that can be answered in this fashion? Or is it just a description of what people do?
So you mean my recommendation about including attention checks?
Yeah, or even the yay saying and nay saying. Is this, because it's under the question wording, but I'm not sure if.
Yeah, it's a little odd that it's there. So it's a thing to look out for that people do. That's strictly speaking what it is. Now there are ways around it, one of which I mentioned, but another thing you can do is just, you could have cases where questions are worded almost the same way, but one is like a negative question, and see if they still just give 5, and then they're contradicting themselves. So that, as far as question wording, that's one thing you could do to solve it. But strictly speaking, the term is just something that people do. So I guess you could complain that it's fallen under the same heading, but the book mentions some other possible ways around it, but that's all I have to say about that. Okay, so this distinction I mentioned at the beginning, the distinction between closed-ended and open-ended questions. Closed-ended means there's a limited number of responses that you can give. So rating scales, multiple choice, anything like that, there's a limited number of options. Open-ended, obviously, there are not a limited number of options. So some kind of written or potentially also a verbal response, but the point is there's not a set number of answers. So most of the remaining terms are ones that fall under the umbrella of closed-ended questions, so different types of closed-ended questions. The most common, of course, is a rating scale. So, how much do you agree with this on a scale of 1 to 7? So how much do you agree on a scale of 1 to 7? 1 being strongly disagree, 7 being strongly agree. Just to flag some issues here, a very prolific researcher named Brian Erb, I have some footage of him, talking a bit about some of the possible pitfalls of rating scales. I'm not showing this to take a firm stance, but just to flag these are some issues that sophisticated people have made. Okay, so as I say, that's just to flag some of those issues, not something that's testable. Okay, a few more. So you can have something called a graphic rating scale. So the standard rating scale, you have 7 options. Each one has a word. Strongly disagree, somewhat disagree, etc. With a graphic rating scale, you have some kind of visual representation with a word on either end. So, how happy are you? All the way from very unhappy to very happy. And you have a slider. You have to choose something, along here. That would be one example. Another one. Semantic differential. And these two are sort of similar. You may have 2 different words. So But one of the example uses is, and this one felt personal to me, it's people who wear shorts in winter. So shots fired. As an aside, I've been pulled aside by the police 3 times for running in shorts and bare feet. I used to do it more, including sometimes in the snow. One time, one of my mom's friends called her and was like, has he lost his mind? Does he have to be hospitalized? But I had one cop pulled me over and said that he got a call. To this day, I don't know if it meant it was a call saying this guy looks like he's in trouble, or if it's he looks deranged and will hurt someone.
Why with no shoes?
I find it very freeing, just the feeling of, I don't know, the calloused feet too, but, and then the only other thing I'll say before the hand is, the 3rd time it happened, I didn't complain or anything, I was just like, oh, this has happened before. And he was like, really? I'll bring it up with the department. So at some point in the Pitt Meadows police, whatever, they said, if you see this guy running in bare feet, it's okay. So, if you ask someone, what do you think about people who run bare feet or who wear shorts in the winter? You could have like, I don't know, stupid, smart, or maybe brave. The book gives a few different examples, and you have to pick something in the middle. Now, as I write this out, I can already feel the question. What's the difference between these two? Because they look kind of similar. Don't worry about it. If it's a close call, I will not be picky about the difference between these two. Okay, so the only 2 that are left nonverbal, this one I can be more clear on. It's all pictures. So, the example the book gives is if there's like, a series of smiley faces with smaller smiles as you go along, then that would be one example. So that one at least is clear. So no words in the options that you have to choose from. So this one, no words, at least no words in the options. There can be words for the question, like how happy are you, but the options are all nonverbal. Okay, and then the last term is just interviewer bias. So the person administering the survey, any ways in which they inadvertently influence how people respond, that's bad. So the researcher may have a hypothesis that they want to confirm, and they may subtly ask the questions in different ways, or even word the written questions in different ways. Okay, so here's what I'll say. I marked most of the paper draft before you all came in. Most of you got them in early. I'll go ahead and post those so you can have a look. I sometimes made a few passing comments. One thing I want to add, if you get 5 out of 5, that doesn't mean there's no issues. I tried to mention that in the notes. It just means it looks like a good faith attempt, so don't think you're off scot-free for APA. I tried to mention if I caught some obvious ones. So in the remaining time, and you're welcome to leave at this point, but all I'll say is peer review is due next week. You're welcome to get started on that now. Just a reminder on that, the peer review should have 2 paragraphs. One that summarizes your partner's paper and mentions any positives, and the second paragraph will have the constructive criticism.
Do you have like I know you will be grading the papers ultimately, but like do you have any sort of, like how should we be constructively criticizing it?
You're gonna have to wing it. Now the flip side of that, one obvious thing is you can draw on things you've learned from the textbook if there's something obviously applicable there. But as with the draft, with the peer review, I'm gonna be pretty, again, as long as it looks like it's basically a good faith attempt, 5 out of 5.
Are we supposed to mostly address the content, or are we supposed to also address like APA stuff?
Yeah, good question. All the above is fine. So it'll kind of depend on the paper. Like if the paper has more APA issues and you can fill a paragraph with that, that's fine. If the AP is pretty much good and you want to be pickier with subtle things, then you can go with that. So that's kind of up to you. Any other general peer review questions? Okay, as I say, not as much for this, so you're all free to go. I'll go ahead and post the draft grades. So see you all next week for